An autumn love story about patience and presence. The lore of Dark Souls 2. Part 1. The Fading Light of Drangleic. There's something about autumn that speaks to the soul in ways no other season can. The golden light filtering through falling leaves, the way warmth slowly gives way to cold, the knowledge that something beautiful is ending even as you witness it. Dark Souls 2 understands this feeling in ways that go beyond simple aesthetics. It is, at its core, an autumn love story. Not the passionate spring romance of new beginnings, nor the blazing summer intensity of kingdoms at their height, but rather the quiet, patient love of those who remain when everything else has faded away. When you first step through the mist of things betwixt and emerge into the coastal town of Majula, you're greeted with a sight that captures this autumnal feeling perfectly. The sun hangs low and heavy in the sky, casting everything in warm amber tones. The ocean stretches out endlessly before you, waves rolling in with patient, eternal rhythm. And there, tending a bonfire, sits a woman in emerald green. She doesn't move to greet you with urgency. She simply waits, as she has waited for countless others before you. There's no rush here. There never is in autumn. This is where our story truly begins, though it started long before you arrived. Drangleic, this kingdom of faded glory, was once something magnificent, but by the time you reach its shores, drawn by compulsion you cannot name, by memories you cannot quite grasp, the kingdom exists in its twilight. Not dead, not yet, but certainly dying. The leaves have begun to fall. The harvest has already been gathered, though what fruit it bore is questionable at best. And like anyone who has ever watched a season change, you can feel time slipping through your fingers like sand. The bearer of the curse, that's what they call you. Not a hero, not a chosen one, not really. Just someone who bears a burden, who carries something heavy that cannot be put down. You've come to Drangleic seeking a cure for the undead curse, seeking an end to the endless cycle of death and resurrection that strips away pieces of yourself with each passing. You've come in autumn, when most reasonable people would have stayed home by the fire. But there's something about people who travel in autumn, isn't there? They're not tourists seeking summer's easy pleasures. They're pilgrims, searchers, souls who understand that sometimes the most important journeys happen when the light is fading. They're willing to be present with endings, to sit with loss, to find beauty in decay. And if that sounds melancholic, well, perhaps it is. But there's a richness to melancholy that shallow happiness can never match. Majula becomes your anchor point, your home in this dying kingdom. And isn't that fitting? Home is where you return between journeys, where you rest and gather strength. Home is where patience lives. You cannot rush a home. It grows slowly, accumulates meaning through repeated presence. Each time you return to Majula, the bonfire burns a little brighter in your memory. Each time the sound of the waves becomes more familiar. Each time that woman in green greets you with the same patient kindness, never demanding, never pushing, simply present. Her name is Shanalot, though most know her as the Emerald Herald. Born of dragons but contrived by men, created with a purpose she could never quite fulfill. She was made to break the undead curse, you see. Crafted as a solution to an impossible problem, given life for a singular reason. But her creators failed. She didn't come out as intended. She couldn't do what she was made to do. And so she waits in Majula, offering what help she can to undead who pass through, knowing that she is a failure, knowing that her purpose remains unfulfilled. Yet she waits, she tends the bonfire, she offers guidance, she remains present. This is the first lesson of Dark Souls 2's autumn love story. Sometimes love means being present even when you cannot fix what's broken. Sometimes it means showing up again and again, even when your grand purpose has failed. Sometimes it means offering a small light in the darkness rather than the blazing sun you'd hoped to bring. Shanalot could have given up. She could have abandoned her post. She could have fled to some distant land where no one knew her as a failure. But she stays, she waits, she remains. And there's something profoundly moving about that kind of patience. In our modern world, we're taught to seek immediate results, to measure success by rapid progress, to abandon any endeavor that doesn't quickly bear fruit. We're told that if something isn't working, move on, find something else, don't waste time on what's already failed. But Shanalot represents a different philosophy. She represents the patience of autumn, of seasons that change slowly, of trees that take years to grow and give their fruit only when the time is right. She calls you bearer of the curse, and she promises to remain by your side until hope has fully withered. Not until you succeed, not until you triumph, but until hope itself dies. That's the covenant she offers, and it's one of the most honest promises in any video game. She's not guaranteeing victory. She's not selling you false comfort. She's simply saying, I will be here. I will be present with you in this fading light as long as there's even a glimmer of possibility left. This is what makes Dark Souls 2 fundamentally different from its predecessor. Dark Souls 1 was a story of spring, of new fires kindled and ages reborn. You were the chosen undead, destined by prophecy, guided by ancient forces. Dark Souls 3 would be a story of winter, of ashes and final endings. But Dark Souls 2 is autumn through and through. It's about the in-between time, the long, slow fade, the kingdom that knows it's dying but hasn't quite let go yet. It's about the people who remain in that space, who choose to be present even as everything crumbles.
Majula itself embodies this perfectly. It's not a bustling city, it's not a ruin, it's something in between, a coastal settlement where people have gathered because they have nowhere else to go. They're not building a new kingdom here. They're not even really living, not in the full sense. They're waiting. They're enduring. They're present with each other in the fading light. There's Salden, the crestfallen warrior who guards the monument. There's Lenegrast, the blacksmith, who keeps his shop even though he's more hollow than most. There's Moglin trying to build a business in a dying world. There's Melentia, the old merchant who's seen too much and stayed anyway. These aren't heroes. They're not even particularly special. They're just people who found their way to this place, this moment, this spot of relative calm in a cursed kingdom. And they stay. They don't have grand ambitions. They don't speak of reclaiming past glories. They simply exist day after day, present with their lot. And there's something deeply human about that, something we can all relate to. Most of us aren't heroes. Most of us are simply trying to be present with our lives, with our limitations, with the slow passage of time. The sun in Majula never moves. Did you notice that? It hangs perpetually in the same position, neither rising nor setting, frozen in eternal autumn afternoon. Time has become strange in Drangleic as it does in all lands touched by the curse. The past and present blur together. Memories become unreliable. But that frozen sun is perhaps the most potent symbol of all. It's a moment captured forever, neither day nor night, neither beginning nor ending. Just the eternal now, the perpetual present that those cursed with undeath must inhabit. And isn't that what patience really means? Not waiting for some future reward, but being fully present in the current moment, however difficult or uncertain it might be. Impatience is always about elsewhere and elsewhen. It's about wanting to be somewhere other than here, somewhen other than now. But patience is the radical acceptance of the present moment, the willingness to be exactly where you are, exactly when you are, without constantly striving for something different. The bearer of the curse must learn this lesson, though the game never makes it explicit. You cannot rush through Dark Souls 2. You cannot force progress. The kingdom reveals itself slowly, at its own pace. Death comes frequently, sending you back to rest at that bonfire in Majula, to catch your breath, to be present with failure before trying again. And each time you return, each time you sit by that fire and feel its warmth, you're practicing patience. You're learning to be here, now, even when here and now are difficult. This is the foundation of Dark Souls 2's love story. Before we can talk about the great tragic romances that echo through Drangleiac's history, before we can explore the patient devotion of its characters, we must understand this fundamental truth. Love in a dying kingdom is not about passion and triumph. It's about presence and patience. It's about showing up day after day, tending the bonfire, offering guidance, remaining available even when there's no guarantee of success. Shanalati embodies this perfectly. She was born to be something she could never become. Her entire existence is marked by failure. Yet she persists in offering what small kindnesses she can. When you return to Majula after each harrowing journey, after each death, after each failure, she's there. Bearer of the curse, seek souls, she says. Not bearer of the curse, you're doing great. Not bearer of the curse, victory is assured, but just simple, present guidance. Seek souls, seek the king. Keep moving forward, one patient step at a time. Her dialogue reveals a deep understanding of the journey you're on. She knows that those who come to Drangleiac seeking salvation soon lose hope and turn hollow. She's seen it happen countless times before. She knows that the crestfallen warrior's broken spirit might foreshadow your own future. She knows that you'll probably fail, as so many before you have failed, but she remains. She offers what small kindnesses she can. She tends the bonfire. She waits. This is love as service, love as presence, love as the quiet commitment to remain even when everything else has faded. It's not romantic in the conventional sense. Shanalati isn't yearning for you, isn't pining away in some tower, but her patient devotion to her purpose, however compromised, her willingness to be present with countless undead as they struggle and fail and fade, this is a kind of love that goes deeper than passion. It's the love of autumn, when the displays are gone, and what remains is simply the willingness to be present with what is. And you, bearer of the curse, must learn to reciprocate this love, not through grand gestures or passionate declarations, but through patience, through returning again and again to that bonfire, through accepting Shanalati's guidance, even when the path seems impossible, through being present with your own failures, your own limitations, your own slow progress, through understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply not giving up, not abandoning the journey, not letting yourself go fully hollow even when it would be so much easier to do so. The autumn sun hangs over Majula, never moving, never changing. The waves roll in with patient rhythm, the bonfire burns, and you, bearer of the curse, sit by that fire and rest before journeying out once more into the dying kingdom. This is where love lives in Dark Souls 2. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet returns. Not in the victories, but in the refusal to abandon hope until it has fully withered. Not in the destination, but in the patient presence with the journey itself. Part 2. The Herald's Vigil. Shanalati's Patient Love.
To truly understand Shanalat's role in this autumn love story, we must delve deeper into her origins and purpose. She is, in many ways, the beating heart of Dark Souls 2's meditation on patience and presence. Created by men, yet born of dragons, she represents an impossible middle ground, something that should not exist, yet does. Her very being is a contradiction, a failure that somehow became something else entirely. The ancient dragon gave her the name Shanalat. Her creators, likely including King Vendrick and his brother Aldea in their desperate experiments to understand and break the curse, never gave her a name at all. She was a project, an attempt, a potential solution to an existential problem. They sought to create something capable of breaking the undead curse, a being that could somehow bridge the gap between mortal and immortal, between flesh and soul. In their ambition, in their hubris, they played at creation, and they failed. But here's where the story becomes interesting, where it shifts from tragedy to something more complex and beautiful. Shanalet did not come out as intended, true. She could not fulfill her designed purpose. But rather than being discarded, rather than being destroyed as a failed experiment, she found her own purpose. She became something her creators never planned for: a guide, a companion, a patient presence in the darkness. She became, in essence, the last firekeeper, the one who tends the flame and helps undead on their journeys. This transformation, this finding of meaning beyond intended purpose, is central to understanding her character. Shanalet could have wallowed in her failure. She could have let the knowledge that she could not do what she was made to do consume her, could have become bitter and withdrawn. Instead, she chose presence. She chose to offer what she could offer, even if it wasn't what was originally intended. She chose to remain. "I was created to break the curse," she might have said, "but I cannot. So instead, I will help those who bear it. I will tend the bonfire. I will offer guidance. I will be present." This is a radical act of self-definition, of choosing one's own purpose when the assigned purpose proves impossible. And it's deeply relevant to the human condition. How many of us have found that we cannot be what we were supposed to be, cannot fulfill the expectations placed upon us, cannot become the ideal versions of ourselves we imagined? The question then becomes, will we collapse under that failure, or will we find meaning in what we can actually do? Shanalet chose the latter, and in doing so she became perhaps the most important character in all of Drangleic. Not the most powerful, not the most central to grand events, but the most important to those countless undead who wash up on the kingdom shores seeking salvation. She is their constant. She is their certainty. No matter how many times they die, no matter how many times they fail, she will be there when they return. She will level them up. She will strengthen their Estus flask. She will offer the same patient guidance. She remains. And her dialogue reveals the depth of her understanding. She knows that misery leads to greater souls. She knows that you must seek those whose names are unutterable, the four old ones endowed with immense souls. She knows the path you must walk, has seen countless others walk it before you. She could grow weary of repeating the same instructions, of watching undead after undead attempt and fail. But she doesn't. Each time, she offers her guidance as if it's the first time. Each time, she treats your journey as if it matters, because to you, it does. And being present with someone means honoring what matters to them, even if you've seen it 1,000 times before. This is a form of love that often goes unrecognized in our culture. We celebrate passionate romance, grand gestures, dramatic sacrifices, but we rarely acknowledge the profound love required to simply show up consistently, patiently, for those who need us. The love of the caregiver who tends to the same patient day after day. The love of the teacher who explains the same concept for the 100th time to a new student. The love of anyone who remains present with others' struggles, even when those struggles are repetitive, even when the outcome is uncertain. This is the form of love that Shanalet offers to the bearer of the curse. Not a romantic lover, perhaps, but a devoted one nonetheless. She loves the bearer of the curse not as an individual, but as a role, a category,
a perpetual arrival of those seeking help, and she loves each one completely, fully in the moment of their presence. She doesn't carry grudges if you ignore her advice. She doesn't grow cold if you fail repeatedly. She simply remains, offering what she can offer, present with wherever you are in your journey. There's a line she speaks that reveals everything. "Bearer of the curse, I will remain by your side, till this frail hope shatters." Not until you succeed, not until you save the kingdom, until hope shatters. She's committed not to your victory, but to the possibility of victory. As long as there's even the faintest glimmer of hope, she'll be there. And when hope finally dies, when it becomes clear that there's nothing more to be done, only then will she release her vigil. This is the patience of someone who understands that outcomes are uncertain, but presence is a choice. She cannot control whether you'll succeed. She cannot guarantee that any bearer of the curse will finally break the cycle, will finally cure the affliction, will finally do what she herself could not. But she can control her own presence. She can choose to remain, to offer guidance, to tend the bonfire. And so she does, with the patient devotion of someone who has found meaning not in achieving the impossible, but in being present with those who attempt it. As you progress through your journey, you encounter Shinalet at key moments throughout Drangleic. She appears outside Drangleic Castle after you've claimed the 4 great souls, directing you to enter. She waits in the undead crypt after you've claimed the King's Ring, warning you that if you continue on this path, you too will one day walk these same grounds without really knowing why. She stands at the Dragonary, revealing that it was her manifestations that led you there, that she's been guiding you all along. These appearances are not random. They represent the stages of your journey, the moments when guidance is most needed. And at each stage, Shinalet is present, not pushing you forward, not demanding progress, but simply being there, offering what she can offer. Her warnings grow more serious as you proceed. She wants you to understand what you're walking toward. She wants you to make this choice with full awareness. But she never tries to stop you. She never says, "Turn back, this is futile." She honors your journey, respects your choice to continue, even as she lays bare the likely outcome.
This is the patience of someone who understands that people must walk their own paths, make their own mistakes, find their own meanings. She could try to shelter you from the harsh realities of Drangleic. She could lie, could offer false comfort, could promise that everything will work out fine. But she doesn't. She tells you the truth, patiently, lovingly, while still remaining by your side. Because real love doesn't shield people from reality. Real love is present with people as they face reality, whatever it might be. At the Dragonary, she reveals something profound. It was her manifestations that led you to Drangleic in the first place. That old woman in the opening cinematic, warning you that you'll lose everything once branded with the curse, telling you about Drangleic where souls may mend your ailing mind. That was Shinalet, or a manifestation of her. She draws the undead to this kingdom, pulls them from wherever they might be, compels them toward Drangleic with a force they can't quite understand. Why would she do this? Why would she draw countless undead to a dying kingdom where hope is all but dead? The answer lies in her purpose, however compromised it might be. She was created to break the curse. She cannot do it herself. But perhaps, just perhaps, one of the undead she guides might succeed where she failed. Perhaps one bearer of the curse will be strong enough, determined enough, lucky enough to find the answer she could never find. So she keeps trying. She keeps drawing them in, guiding them, helping them, hoping that maybe this time will be different. This is patient hope in its purest form. Not the confident expectation that something good will definitely happen, but the refusal to give up on the possibility, even after countless failures. Shinalet has seen how many undead attempt this journey and fail. Hundreds? Thousands? The game doesn't say. But we know she's been at this a long time. We know that Drangleic rose and fell, that Vendrick came and went, that ages have turned while she remained. And still she hopes, still she guides, still she draws new undead to try again. There's a kind of madness in this, if we're honest. The definition of insanity, they say, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. By that measure, Shinalet should have given up long ago. She should have accepted that no bearer of the curse will succeed, that the undead curse cannot be broken, that her vigil is pointless. But she doesn't. She persists. She remains. Because that's what love does. Love persists in hoping even when hope seems unreasonable. Love remains present even when presence seems pointless. Love continues offering what it can offer even when all evidence suggests it won't be enough. If you speak to royal sorcerer Navlan, he tells you that many believe the Emerald Herald is the last firekeeper. This is significant. Firekeepers in the Dark Souls universe are those who tend the flames, who help link fire and souls, who serve as anchors for undead in a confusing, timeless world. They're not warriors, they're not rulers, they're simply present, reliably, consistently, offering a service that costs them greatly, but which they provide anyway. Shinalet is the last of these, the final one performing this ancient art of caregiving that the world is losing. When she speaks to you, when she guides you, she's performing one of the final acts of this dying tradition, and she does it with grace, with kindness, with the patient devotion of someone who knows this matters, even if, especially if, it's all ending. The name Shinalet, given to her by dragons, is itself significant. Dragons in Dark Souls lore represent a kind of timeless existence, beings who existed before disparity, before the age of fire, before mortality became the defining characteristic of life. By naming her, they acknowledged her as something beyond a mere human creation. They recognized in her something dragon-like, permanence, patience, and existence outside the normal flow of time. She belongs to both worlds, created by men, but recognized by dragons. She is neither human nor dragon, neither mortal nor eternal, but something in between, the perfect guide for undead who themselves exist in that liminal space between life and death. In many ways, Shinalet is what the bearer of the curse might become with enough patience, enough time, enough failure. She is the end point of the journey in a sense, not triumphant success, not hollow failure, but something else entirely. A being who has made peace with limitations, who has found purpose beyond original intentions, who remains present even when everything has fallen apart. If the bearer of the curse can learn from her example, can internalize her patient devotion, can understand that sometimes love means simply not abandoning your post, even when your post seems pointless, then perhaps the curse's greatest damage, the loss of self, the fading into hollow nothingness, can be resisted. This is why Shinalet is so crucial to Dark Souls 2's autumn love story. She exemplifies what it means to love in a fading world. She shows us that patience is not passive waiting, but active presence. She demonstrates that remaining matters, that showing up matters, that being available matters, even when nothing else seems to. She is autumn personified. Neither the vibrant life of spring nor the stark death of winter, but the in-between time, when things are ending but haven't quite ended yet, when there's still work to be done, still services to provide, still bonfires to tend. And so she waits. By the bonfire in Majula, by the gates of Drangleic Castle, in the crypts where Vendrick wanders, at the eyrie where dragons once soared, she waits with patient love for the next bearer of the curse to arrive, to try once more, to perhaps, just perhaps, succeed where all others have failed. Her hope may be frail, may be barely alive, but it has not yet shattered, and until it does, she remains.
This is the second great lesson of Dark Souls 2's love story. Patience is not about waiting for something to happen, it's about being present while it doesn't. Shenalite doesn't pace anxiously, doesn't fret about when the next undead will arrive or whether they'll be the one. She simply is, present, available, ready to offer guidance when it's needed. And in that presence, in that availability, she expresses a love deeper than most of us will ever know. The love of complete, patient devotion to a purpose that may never be fulfilled, offered freely to strangers who owe her nothing, sustained across countless failures and endless time. When you finally reach the throne of want, after all your struggles, all your deaths, all your patient progress through this dying kingdom, Shenalite appears one final time. She tells you that her journey is complete. Not your journey. Yours is just beginning its final act, but hers. Her vigil, her guidance, her patient presence has led you here. Whatever happens next is up to you. She's done what she could do, offered what she could offer, and now she steps back, releases you to make your own choice. It's a moment of profound trust and love. After all this guidance, all this presence, she doesn't try to force your hand. She doesn't demand you take the throne or refuse it. She simply presents the choice and honors whatever you decide. Because that's what patient love does. It guides, it supports, it remains present, but it doesn't control. It trusts that the person you've been helping has grown strong enough, wise enough to make their own decision, even if that decision might be wrong. Shenalite's journey ends there. Or perhaps it doesn't end at all. Perhaps she returns to Modula, to that bonfire by the sea, to wait for the next bearer of the curse who will inevitably arrive. Perhaps the cycle continues with her patient vigil at its center, an eternal autumn that never quite gives way to winter. We don't know. The game doesn't tell us, but somehow it feels right to imagine her still there, still waiting, still offering guidance with patient love to whoever might need it. This is the Emerald Herald's gift to us, the example of patient presence in a world that has long since lost its patience. The model of love as steady devotion rather than dramatic gesture. The proof that remaining matters, that showing up matters, that being available to help matters, even when, especially when, everything seems pointless. Part 3. A Kingdom in Autumn. Drangleic Golden Age and Fall. Every love story needs context, and to truly understand the patient autumnal love that permeates Dark Souls 2, we must understand the kingdom itself. Drangleic was not always dying. There was a time when it bloomed, when it thrived, when its harvest was plentiful and its future bright. Understanding that golden age and how it faded into autumn gives us the backdrop against which all other stories play out. Drangleic was founded by two brothers, Vendrick, who would become king, and Aldia, who would become known as the Scholar of the First Sin. Together, they built something remarkable from the ruins of kingdoms that came before. And there's something important in that detail. Drangleic wasn't built on virgin land. It rose from ruins, from the remains of other kingdoms that had already lived and died. It was already a second chance, already an autumn kingdom, even in its supposed spring. Vendrick was, by all accounts, a remarkable man. Strong, wise, ambitious, yet compassionate. He peered into the essence of the soul itself, seeking to understand the fundamental nature of existence, life, death, and the curse that plagued humanity. He wasn't content simply to rule. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand. He wanted to find a way to break the cycle that had claimed so many kingdoms before his own. In this, he was motivated by something admirable, not mere personal ambition, but a genuine desire to help his people, to free humanity from its curse. Aldia shared his brother's goals, but approached them differently. While Vendrick ruled, Aldia researched.
While Vendrick built armies and castles, Aldia built laboratories and libraries. While Vendrick dealt in the public sphere of politics and war, Aldia delved into the secret sphere of dark experiments and forbidden knowledge. Together, they represented two sides of the same coin, the philosopher king and the mad scientist, both seeking the same ultimate truth through different means. For a time, this worked.
She arrived alone from a faraway land, a woman of unparalleled beauty. And Vendrick, for all his wisdom, fell in love. He made her his queen, his dear Chandra, and she became a fixture at his side. The people loved her, or at least they came to accept her. She brought what Chancellor Welliger describes as a peace to the kingdom, a peace so deep it was like the dark. At the time, this probably seemed like a good thing. Peace was desirable, especially in a land constantly threatened by the curse. But in retrospect, that description feels ominous. A peace like the dark. A stillness that might be mistaken for tranquility, but was actually something else entirely. What Vendrick didn't know, couldn't have known initially, was that Nishandra was not human. She was a child of dark, a fragment of Manus, father of the Abyss, the same ancient evil defeated in the first Dark Souls. When Manus was destroyed, his essence shattered into fragments, and those fragments eventually took humanoid forms. Nishandra was one such fragment, along with her sisters who would plague other kingdoms in other times. Each represented a different aspect of Manus's nature. Nishandra embodied want, craving, the insatiable hunger for more. She was desire personified, and her desires would doom Drangleic. But again, Vendrick didn't know this. He saw only a beautiful woman who seemed to love him, who counseled him wisely, who stood by his side as he ruled. And isn't that how it always goes with tragedy? The seeds are planted in innocence, in moments that seemed good at the time, in choices made with the best intentions. Vendrick loved Nishandra. That was real. And that love, that genuine feeling, would be the instrument of his kingdom's fall. Nishandra warned Vendrick of the giants beyond the sea. She told him they posed a looming threat, that they would eventually attack Drangleic if he didn't strike first. She advised that if he conquered the giants and made their power his own, he could step closer to the flame, could perhaps find the means to finally cure the undead curse. It all made sense. It all seemed reasonable. And so Vendrick listened to his queen, trusted the woman he loved, and made the decision that would ultimately destroy everything he'd built. He led his armies across the sea and waged war against the giants. And he won, technically. Vendrick was strong enough, his forces powerful enough that they subdued the giants and took what they wanted, an artifact of great power, something precious to the giants, something Vendrick believed would help him in his quest to understand and control the curse. He brought prisoners back to Drangleic, clapped in irons, and used their souls to create the golems that would build his castle. It was a grand achievement, a military victory that seemed to secure Drangleic's future. This was Drangleic's peak, its high summer, if we continue the seasonal metaphor, the moment of greatest power, greatest reach, greatest confidence. Vendrick had defeated an ancient enemy, had acquired mysterious power, had a beautiful queen at his side, and loyal subjects throughout his realm. He built Drangleic Castle to celebrate this victory, to show his love and gratitude to Nishandra. It must have seemed like nothing could go wrong, like the kingdom's golden age would last forever. But summer doesn't last forever. It never does. And Drangleic's autumn began almost immediately after its peak. The giants weren't content to simply accept defeat.
How could they be? Vendrick had invaded their land, stolen something precious, enslaved their people. So they came for revenge. Led by the giant lord, they crossed the sea and attacked Drangleic, driven by rage and an indomitable will to reclaim what was taken. And this war, this second war with the giants, was nothing like the first. This time, the giants were motivated by pure vengeance. This time, they weren't defending their homeland, they were attacking. This time, they would not stop until they'd gotten what they came for. The war lasted for generations. It devastated Drangleic. The kingdom's armies were slowly ground down, its people killed or fled, its prosperity destroyed. The land itself was scarred by conflict. And with the war came something even worse. The undead curse returned in full force, afflicting the population, turning soldiers into hollow warriors who fought long after their minds were gone. Vendrick did everything he could to hold back the tide. He erected the Forest of Fallen Giants as a fortress against the invasion. He deployed his finest knights. He used every resource at his disposal. But slowly, inevitably, the kingdom began to crumble. And during this long twilight, during the slow slide from summer into autumn, Vendrick began to suspect the truth about his beloved queen. We don't know exactly when he figured it out, or how. Perhaps it was something Aldea discovered in his research. Perhaps it was Vendrick's own wisdom finally piercing through the veil of his affection. Perhaps Nishandra made some misstep, revealed something she shouldn't have. But at some point, Vendrick understood the woman he loved, the woman for whom he'd built a kingdom and fought wars, was not what she appeared to be. She was darkness given form. She was want incarnate, and everything she'd advised him to do, every choice she'd guided him toward, had been in service of her own insatiable hunger for power. The realization must have been devastating. Imagine loving someone completely, trusting them with your kingdom and your heart, building your entire rule around your partnership with them, only to discover that they've been manipulating you from the start. That the wars you fought, the people who died, the kingdom now crumbling around you, all of it was orchestrated by the person sleeping beside you. All of it was in service of goals you never understood, purposes you never agreed to.
This is where Vendrick's story becomes truly tragic, truly autumnal. He could have confronted Nishandra directly. He could have revealed her true nature to his kingdom, could have tried to rally his people against her. But he didn't. Instead, he withdrew. He took what he knew, and he retreated deeper and deeper into himself, into his castle, into his research, until finally he fled to the undead crypt and locked himself away from the world. Some might call this cowardice, but looked at another way, it's a kind of patient resistance. Vendrick knew that Nishandra wanted something specific, the power he'd taken from the giants, the throne he'd built, the knowledge he'd accumulated. He knew that if he confronted her openly, she would simply take what she wanted by force or deception. So instead, he denied her. He removed himself and his knowledge from her reach. He became hollow, stripped himself of will and purpose, made himself useless to her schemes. He couldn't defeat her, couldn't undo what she'd already caused, but he could prevent her from achieving her ultimate goal. And so King Vendrick, once the mightiest ruler Drangleic had ever known, spends eternity wandering in circles in the darkness of the undead crypt. His crown is gone, hidden away where Nishandra cannot find it. His ring of power is locked behind a door she cannot open. His memories, his wisdom, his very self, all of it stripped away, reduced to nothing so that she cannot use it. He's barely more than a hollow, stumbling in endless loops through the dark, pulling a sword too large for him to even lift properly. It's one of the most pathetic sights in the entire game. This towering figure, naked except for tattered rags, muttering about mercy as he drags a massive sword through the crypt. He doesn't even fight back properly when you attack him. He just swings that sword slowly, heavily, like every movement takes all the effort he has left. There's no grace here, no dignity, no hint of the great king he once was. Just a broken man who gave up everything, including himself, in a desperate act of denial. But here's what makes this autumnal rather than simply tragic. Vendrick chose this. He wasn't forced into hollowing. He wasn't defeated in battle. He actively selected this fate, this slow fading, this reduction of self, because it was the only way he could see to resist Nishandra's will. He loved her once. Perhaps part of him still did, even knowing the truth. But he loved his kingdom more, loved humanity more, loved the hope of breaking the curse more. So he removed himself from the equation. He became nothing so that she couldn't use him to achieve something worse. This is patient resistance of the deepest kind, not the dramatic rebellion of open war, not the passionate defiance of heroic sacrifice, but the slow, grinding endurance of someone who denies the enemy what they want simply by refusing to give it to them, no matter the personal cost. Vendrick could have ended his existence completely, could have sought true death, but he didn't. He remained, hollowed but not quite gone, present in his absence, a living denial of Nishandra's desires. When you encounter him in the crypt, if you wear the king's ring and have the ashen mist heart, you can speak with his memories. And what he tells you reveals the depth of his understanding and his regret. He warns you about the throne, about how it doesn't belong to anyone. He tells you that his dear Chandra will lead him astray, that even now he struggles to understand her true nature. He admits that he sought the power of the giants and it brought him nothing but ruin. He recognizes his mistakes with painful clarity, yet he's powerless to do anything about them now. These conversations are heartbreaking because they reveal that somewhere inside that hollow shell, Vendrick is still aware. He knows what happened to him, to his kingdom, to everything he built. He carries that knowledge like a weight, unable to act on it, unable to change it, only able to warn those who come after him. It's a special kind of hell, and he chose it. That's what makes it so profoundly sad. This was his best option. This was the most effective thing he could do with what remained of his power. Become nothing, warn others, hope that somehow his sacrifice might mean something. And in its way, it does mean something, because Vendrick in his hollowed state becomes a teacher, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what the pursuit of power and trust in the wrong person can cost. Every bearer of the curse who finds him learns something essential about Drangleic, about Nishandra, about the nature of the curse itself. His patient endurance in that crypt, his willingness to remain even in this reduced state, serves a purpose beyond what he could have imagined. He becomes part of the solution in a way his powerful self never could have been. This is the autumn lesson writ large. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is reduce yourself. Remove yourself from the equation, even if it means destroying yourself in the process. Sometimes patience means enduring in a reduced state rather than going out in a blaze of glory. Sometimes love for others means hating what you've become, but staying anyway, because your presence, even your hollowed presence, still serves a purpose.
And there's a beauty in this autumn state that's easy to miss if you're looking for spring or summer. Drangleic in its decay is hauntingly beautiful. The forest of fallen giants with its fog and ruins. The shrine of Amana with its glowing water and singing maidens. The dragon eyrie with its ethereal light and ancient stones. These places wouldn't be as affecting if they were thriving. Their beauty comes precisely from their decay, from the way they persist despite everything, from the traces of former glory visible in current ruin. The same is true of Vendrick. His hollowed form in the crypt is pathetic, yes, but there's also something moving about it. This was a king. This was a man who built a kingdom, who loved and was betrayed, who made terrible mistakes and tried to make them right the only way he could. And now he's this, a shambling hollow who can barely lift his sword. The contrast between what was and what is creates a poignancy that straightforward tragedy never could. Aldea, Vendrick's brother, took a different path through Drangleic's autumn. Rather than becoming hollow, he became something else entirely. His experiments, his attempts to understand and transcend the curse, transformed him into an immortal being of fire and darkness, bound to bonfires, unable to die or truly live. He serves as a philosophical counterpoint to Vendrick's choice, showing that there are multiple ways to persist through autumn, multiple forms that patient endurance can take. When you encounter Aldea in Scholar of the First Sin, he's been observing for a very long time. He's watched kingdoms rise and fall, watched countless undead attempt and fail to break the cycle, watched the same patterns repeat endlessly. And his conclusion is that the cycle itself is the problem. Link the fire or embrace the dark. Either way, you're perpetuating the same system. Either way, you're playing a game rigged against you from the start. His dialogue is dense with philosophy, with questions about purpose and meaning, and whether escape is even possible. He doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't promise that following his path will lead to salvation. He simply presents an alternative. Don't choose fire or dark. Choose understanding. Choose to question the very framework you're operating within. Choose to seek a third way, even if you don't know what that way might be. This is another form of patient resistance. Aldea doesn't fight Nashandra directly. He doesn't try to save Vendrick or Drangleic. He simply observes, questions, and waits for someone who might be capable of true understanding. He's willing to wait eternally if necessary, bound to those bonfires, speaking to bearer after bearer of the curse, hoping that eventually one of them will truly hear what he's saying and make a choice beyond the false binary presented by the throne. Together, Vendrick and Aldea represent two approaches to Drangleic's autumn. Vendrick retreated into hollow denial, sacrificing himself to prevent others from using his power. Aldea transformed into something beyond human, transforming his form to gain eternal perspective. Neither is traditionally heroic, neither is triumphant, but both are forms of patient endurance, of remaining present through the long fade, of contributing what they can to the possibility, however remote, that someone, someday, might actually break the cycle. The kingdom they built and lost becomes a kind of monument to these choices. Every area you explore, every boss you face, every item you find, tells part of the story of Drangleic's autumn. The rotten in the Black Gulch embodies the collective suffering of all those discarded by the kingdom. The lost sinner represents failed attempts to rekindle the first flame. The old Iron King shows what happens when ambition literally consumes you. The Duke's dear Freya guards the research of those who sought to transcend their limitations through knowledge. Each of these great souls tells a story of reaching, grasping, trying to achieve something beyond normal human limits. And each of them failed in their own ways. They became bosses, obstacles, challenges for future undead to overcome. But they're not villains, not really. They're cautionary tales, examples of what happens when you pursue power or knowledge or transcendence without wisdom, without patience, without understanding the full cost. This is what Drangleic teaches those patient enough to learn from it. Ambition without wisdom leads to autumn, to decay, to slow fading. But autumn itself isn't the end. It's a state that can be inhabited, can be endured, can even be beautiful in its own melancholic way. The kingdom falls, yes. The king becomes hollow, yes. But life continues in diminished form. Purpose persists even when grand ambitions fail. Love remains possible even in the ruins. When you walk through Heidi's Tower of Flame, now mostly submerged, you're seeing another kingdom that fell before Drangleic. The old dragon slayer guards his post there, alone, fighting anyone who approaches out of hollow habit more than true purpose. The Knights of Heidi sit motionless until disturbed, then rise to fight with skills they no longer understand. It's a preview of what Drangleic will become in time. Just another ruin, just another forgotten kingdom, just another autumn that finally gave way to winter. But here's the thing about cycles, about seasons, about the way Dark Souls 2 understands time. Autumn doesn't last forever, but it also never quite ends. Because once winter comes, once everything has fallen completely, then spring can begin again. Another kingdom will rise on the ruins of Drangleic, just as Drangleic rose on the ruins of kingdoms before it. Another king will make similar mistakes.
Another queen will manipulate. Another autumn will come.
This could be depressing, could be nihilistic, and Aldea certainly sees it that way, which is why he rails against the cycle, why he seeks escape from this endless repetition. But looked at another way, it's actually comforting. Your failures aren't final. The kingdom's fall isn't an ending, but a transition. Autumn is sad, yes, but it's also necessary. Without it, there can be no winter, and without winter, there can be no spring. Vendrick's story, Trengleick's story, is ultimately about accepting autumn, about understanding that sometimes things fall apart not because you've failed completely, but because falling apart is what things do. About finding meaning and purpose even in decay. About remaining present even when presence is painful. About loving even when love has been betrayed. About hoping even when hope seems foolish. The king loved Nishandra. That love was real, even though she betrayed it. And he could have let that betrayal destroy him, could have become bitter and vengeful, could have lashed out destructively. Instead, he chose a different path. He removed himself gently, denied her what she wanted without attacking her, and in doing so, preserved the possibility that future undead might succeed where he failed. That's a kind of love too. Love for those who come after, love for the possibility of eventual solution, love that persists even after personal happiness is gone. Drangleic itself loved its people enough to keep structures in place, to keep bonfires burning, to keep paths open even after everyone had gone hollow or fled. The kingdom in its autumn remains navigable, remains useful, remains a place where growth is possible even if it's no longer growing itself. Like an elderly teacher who keeps teaching even after their own career is over. Like a parent who keeps loving even after children have grown and gone. Drangleic serves even in decay. This is the heart of the autumn love story. Service that continues after glory has faded. Presence that persists after purpose has failed. Patience that endures when ambition is exhausted. Vendrick in his crypt, Aldea at his bonfires, Drangleic itself with its empty halls and hollow guards, all of them represent this same principle. They remain, they serve, they teach. They love in their way long after the kind of love celebrated in summer stories has burned out. And you, bearer of the curse, walk through this autumn kingdom learning these lessons whether you know it or not. You see what ambition costs. You learn what betrayal does. You understand, slowly, that patience and presence might be more valuable than power. You discover that sometimes remaining is more important than winning. You find meaning in the ruins precisely because they're ruins, because they show you what happens when summer ends but winter hasn't quite come. Drangleic's autumn is long, perhaps eternal in some sense, but it's not empty. It's full of lessons, full of beauty, full of stories waiting to be understood by those patient enough to listen. The kingdom loved once, failed spectacularly, and now exists as a testament to both that love and that failure. And that's more honest, more human, more real than any triumphant tale of heroes who never stumble. Part 4. The Tragic Romance, Vendrick and Nishandra. At the center of Drangleic's story lies a romance that seems, on the surface, like a simple tale of deception and betrayal. A king falls in love with a beautiful stranger. The stranger is secretly a monster. The kingdom falls. But Dark Souls 2 is more subtle than that, more nuanced. The relationship between Vendrick and Nashandra is genuinely tragic precisely because both parties brought something real to it, something that transcended their roles of deceiver and deceived. Let's start with what we know for certain. Nashandra came from a distant land, arriving alone. This detail matters. She wasn't part of a delegation, wasn't fleeing with refugees, wasn't carried in on anyone's shoulders. She came by herself, which suggests intention, purpose, agency. She chose Drangleic specifically, chose Vendrick specifically, for reasons that had nothing to do with happenstance. Why? Because Nashandra, as a fragment of Manus, is driven by want. Not want in the sense of material desire, but want as a fundamental force, an ontological hunger that can never be satisfied. She wants power, yes, but more than that, she wants the possibility of fulfillment that power represents. She's seeking something to fill the void at her core, the absence that defines her very being as a fragment of something destroyed. Vendrick had what she wanted: strength, wisdom, a kingdom, and most importantly, the potential to transcend the curse, to peer into the essence of the soul itself. He was actively seeking ways to transcend the curse, to peer into the essence of the soul itself. He was building something that might, just might, lead to the kind of power that could satisfy her insatiable want. So she came to him, presented herself as human, as vulnerable, as someone who needed his protection, and offered him companionship in return. And here's where it gets complicated. Nashandra didn't just deceive Vendrick. She couldn't have succeeded if that's all she'd done. Vendrick was too wise, too perceptive. His kingdom wouldn't have accepted her if she'd been obviously false. She had to actually be a good queen. At least in some respects, she had to actually provide value to Vendrick and to Drangleic. She had to play the role so completely that it became, in some sense, real.
Chancellor Welliger remembers her bringing peace to Drangleic. Peace like the dark, he says, but still peace. During her time as queen, before the wars and the fall, there must have been years of genuine stability. Nashandra had to learn the intricacies of ruling, had to make decisions that benefited the kingdom, had to stand beside Vendrick through challenges and triumphs. She had to be present for all of it, had to perform queenship not just as a mask, but as a lived reality. Can you do that without changing? Can you play a role for years without that role affecting who you are? This is the question at the heart of their tragedy. Nashandra was manipulating Vendrick toward her ultimate goal, yes. But she was also living with him, ruling beside him, sharing his bed and his throne in his dreams. She was experiencing what it meant to be human, to be connected, to be part of something larger than her own hunger. And Vendrick, for his part, genuinely loved her. This wasn't a king taking a trophy wife. This wasn't political marriage or physical attraction alone. He loved Nashandra as a person, as a partner, as someone he could share his deepest thoughts and fears with. He built Drangleic Castle for her, a monument to their love, a physical manifestation of his devotion. He listened to her counsel. He trusted her judgment. He shared power with her in a way kings rarely do with their queens. This means their relationship had real substance, real depth. They had conversations. They made decisions together. They faced challenges as partners. And while Nashandra was guiding him toward her own ends, she was also experiencing genuine partnership, perhaps for the first time in her existence. She was the fragment of an ancient evil, true, but she was also a woman with a husband who loved her, a kingdom that respected her, a role that gave her identity beyond mere want. Could she have fallen in love with him? The game never says explicitly. Nashandra's true feelings remain ambiguous. But consider, she could have destroyed Vendrick at any time. She could have manipulated him more directly, more brutally. She could have simply waited for him to find what she wanted and then taken it. But instead, she took the slow path. She became his queen, truly his queen for years before making her final move. This suggests something more complex than simple deception. It suggests that Nashandra was, perhaps, trying to be human, trying to fill her want not through raw power, but through relationship, through partnership, through love. And maybe for a time it almost worked. Maybe there were moments when her hunger quieted, when being Vendrick's queen was enough, when she could almost forget what she really was. But want is patient. Want can wait. And eventually, inevitably, Nashandra's true nature reasserted itself. She counseled Vendrick to wage war on the giants, knowing it would lead him toward the power she craved. And this is where we see the tragedy most clearly. She may have hesitated. The advice came after years of marriage. Why wait so long if she'd been planning this from the start? Perhaps because she was genuinely conflicted. Perhaps because part of her wanted to stay as she was, to remain Vendrick's beloved Chandra, to let her want remain unfulfilled rather than destroy what she'd built. But fragments don't get to choose their nature. Want wants. And eventually, Nashandra did what she was created to do. She manipulated Vendrick toward disaster, knowing that it would ultimately give her access to what she sought. Vendrick's war with the giants succeeded. He brought back their treasure, brought back their prisoners, thought he'd secured his kingdom's future, and moved closer to his goal of understanding the curse. But Nashandra knew what would happen next. She knew the giants would return for vengeance. She knew the kingdom would be weakened by endless war. She knew that eventually Vendrick would be forced to rely more and more on the power he'd stolen, would be drawn deeper and deeper toward the throne that represented everything she wanted. And perhaps she regretted it. Perhaps watching the kingdom fall, watching Vendrick struggle with consequences of decisions she'd guided him toward, she experienced something like remorse. We'll never know. The game doesn't give us access to Nashandra's interiority. We don't get to hear her thoughts, don't get to know if she sometimes wished she could just be the queen and not the fragment, could just love Vendrick and forget about power and want and ancient hungers. What we do know is that Vendrick eventually discovered the truth. And when he did, when he understood what Nashandra really was, he didn't kill her, he didn't expose her, he didn't even confront her directly as far as we can tell. Instead, he fled. He withdrew. He became hollow. He removed himself from the equation, denying her what she wanted by becoming useless to her. This reaction is fascinating. Why not fight? Why not rage against the betrayal? Why not try to warn his kingdom, try to undo the damage, try to strike back at the woman who deceived him? The answer is perhaps that he still loved her. Even knowing the truth, even understanding that their entire relationship was built on manipulation, some part of Vendrick still loved Nashandra, and he couldn't bear to harm her, even to save himself or his kingdom.
This is the most heartbreaking aspect of their story. The betrayal was real. The manipulation was real. But the love was real too. Both things can be true simultaneously. Vendrick loved someone who was using him, and that love was genuine even though it was misplaced. Nashandra needed something from someone who loved her, and she may have come to value that love even as she continued pursuing her ultimate goal. When you finally face Nashandra in the throne of want, she's desperate. She's waited so long, come so close. Everything she's worked toward is within reach. But she's also alone. Vendrick is gone, hollowed in his crypt. The kingdom she ruled beside him is destroyed. Everyone who might have cared about her, might have seen her as a person rather than a monster, is dead or fled. She's achieved nothing and lost everything in the pursuit of want that can never be satisfied. The fight itself is melancholic. Her attacks are dark and draining, reflecting her nature as a child of want. She tries to curse you, to take from you, to consume what you have in hopes it will fill what she lacks. But it never will. Even if she wins, even if she claims the throne and all the power it represents, she'll still be empty. Because want isn't satisfied by fulfillment. Want is a hole that goes all the way through, and no amount of power can plug it. After you defeat her, you can take the throne or walk away. But either way, Nishandra's story is over. She failed. She destroyed the kingdom she helped build, lost the husband who loved her, became exactly the monster she'd pretended not to be. And for what? She never got what she wanted. The throne remains out of reach. The power she sought eludes her in the end. Was any of it worth it? Did she ever wonder in those final moments whether she should have just stayed as Vendrick's queen, whether she should have accepted that life, that love, that role, and let her want go unsatisfied? We can't know, but it's worth considering that her tragedy might not be that she betrayed Vendrick, but that she betrayed herself. She had something rare, genuine partnership, real love, a meaningful role in a thriving kingdom, and she sacrificed all of it chasing after something she could never actually have. This mirrors so many human tragedies. How many people have destroyed good relationships chasing perfect ones? How many have abandoned satisfying lives seeking ultimate fulfillment? How many have let want drive them past contentment and into disaster? Nishandra's story is extreme, mythological, but the pattern is deeply human. We all carry want within us. We all struggle with the question of whether to be satisfied with what we have or to risk it all pursuing something more. Vendrick's tragedy is different, but complementary. He loved authentically, trusted completely, built something beautiful with someone he thought he knew. And it was all based on a lie. Or was it? That's the question that must have haunted him. Were the years with Nishandra meaningless because she'd had ulterior motives? Were the moments of genuine partnership invalidated by her eventual betrayal? Was their love a lie, or was it the one true thing in a relationship otherwise built on deception? Perhaps this is why he couldn't kill her, couldn't confront her, because destroying Nishandra would mean admitting that all of it, their marriage, their partnership, the kingdom they built together, was false. And maybe Vendrick couldn't accept that. Maybe he needed to believe that somewhere in there, something had been real. So instead of fighting, he fled. Instead of destroying what they had, he simply removed himself from it. He let it remain, ambiguous and unresolved, while he faded into hollow nothing. This is an autumnal approach to heartbreak, not the passionate fury of summer betrayal, not the cold finality of winter ending, but the melancholic uncertainty of autumn. Things are ending, yes, but they haven't quite ended. Love was real, but it's also over. The relationship mattered, but it also destroyed everything. Both things are true, and autumn is the season that can hold contradictions like that without resolving them. Chancellor Welliger, one of the few who remained from Vendrick's time, remembers the king with something like pity. He speaks of Vendrick's might, his wisdom, his glory, but he also speaks of his mistakes, his blindness, his eventual fall. Welliger served the kingdom through it all, watched the rise and the fall, saw Vendrick at his best and worst. And he doesn't judge. He simply remembers, bears witness, offers information to those who come seeking it. This is what others can do in the wake of tragic love. Bear witness. Not justify, not condemn, but simply acknowledge that it happened, that it mattered, that it led where it led. Welliger doesn't try to redeem Vendrick or damn Nishandra. He just tells their story as he saw it, lets you draw your own conclusions about who was right or wrong, or whether those categories even apply. The items you can find throughout Drangleic tell pieces of their story. Nishandra's black set speaks of her darkness, but also her beauty. Vendrick's blessing carries his protection, even after he's gone. The king's ring proves his authority, but also his willingness to hide it away rather than let it be misused. Each item is a fragment of their relationship, evidence that they were real people who made real choices that had real consequences. And perhaps the saddest detail, if you wear the king's ring and use the ashen mist heart to speak with Vendrick's memory, he still calls Nishandra Chandra,
his term of endearment, his pet name for her. Even in his memory form, even knowing what she is, he can't quite stop loving her. That affection persists, fossilized in his very soul, long after it should have died.
This is what makes their story genuinely tragic, rather than just a tale of villainy. Both of them were trapped by their natures. Vendrick couldn't help loving, Nashandra couldn't help wanting, and together they created something beautiful that was always doomed to fail. The kingdom rose on the foundation of their partnership and fell because of what that partnership actually was. The love was real, and it wasn't enough. Both things, simultaneously true. Modern readers might want to simplify this story, to make Nashandra purely evil, a manipulator with no genuine feelings. To make Vendrick purely a victim, deceived and helpless. But Dark Souls 2 resists that simplification. It insists on complexity, on ambiguity, on the possibility that people can be multiple contradictory things at once. Nashandra was a monster and a queen. Vendrick was wise and blind. Their love was genuine and destructive. The kingdom was glorious and doomed. This is autumn thinking, the refusal of easy answers, the patience to sit with complexity, the wisdom to understand that endings don't invalidate what came before them. Vendrick and Nashandra's autumn was their entire relationship. It never had a spring. It was always already compromised by Nashandra's nature. It will never have a winter. Even destroyed, the relationship persists in memory, in consequence, in the ruins it left behind. What can we learn from their tragedy? Perhaps this: love doesn't protect you from being manipulated. Sincerity doesn't guarantee authenticity from others. Building something beautiful together doesn't mean you're building on solid ground. These are hard truths, autumn truths, the kind of wisdom that comes from watching leaves fall and knowing you can't stop them. But also, love matters even when it fails. Vendrick's devotion to Nashandra wasn't wasted even though it was misplaced. The kingdom they built together wasn't meaningless even though it fell. The years of partnership weren't lies even though they were based on deception. Something was real there, something that transcended manipulation and want and the inevitable tragedy that followed. When you stand before the throne of want, having defeated Nashandra, you're standing in the ruins of their relationship. This is what they were fighting over, what she wanted, what he tried to deny her. It's empty, fundamentally empty, because want can never be filled. But it's also heavy with meaning, with the weight of all the choices and loves and betrayals that led to this moment. You can take the throne or walk away. Either choice honors their story in its way. Taking it means acknowledging that the pursuit of power, however destructive, drives human history forward. Walking away means acknowledging that sometimes the only winning move is not to play. But either way, you're making a choice they never got to make. Vendrick fled before he could choose. Nashandra was defeated before she could claim her prize. You get to decide, and that decision is their legacy. This is the gift of tragic romance to those who come after, the wisdom purchased with others' suffering, the lessons learned from others' mistakes, the possibility of choosing differently because someone else showed you where the wrong path leads. Vendrick and Nashandra paid the price so future undead might understand what that price is. Their autumn became eternal so others might learn to recognize autumn when they see it approaching in their own lives. And perhaps, somewhere in the memory of their kingdom, in the echoes of their voices, in the items that carry their power and protection, there remains a ghost of what they were to each other. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, not the tragic ending, but the moments when it was real. The early days when Nashandra was learning to be a queen and Vendrick was learning to share his throne. The quiet conversations in the evening, the joint decisions about the kingdom's future, the simple human act of two people existing together, building together, loving together, before it all fell apart. That's worth remembering too. Not just the tragedy, but what came before the tragedy. Not just the autumn, but the summer that preceded it. Because without that summer, the autumn wouldn't hurt so much. Without the beauty of what they built, the ruins wouldn't be so poignant. Without the love being real, the betrayal wouldn't cut so deep. Vendrick and Nishanda's story is Dark Souls 2's central tragic romance, the love story that doomed a kingdom. But it's only tragic because it was also, in some measure, genuine. And that's the most autumn truth of all. The things that matter most are the things that hurt most when they end. The price of love is loss. The cost of building is eventual ruin. The reward for patience is watching what you patiently tended finally fail.